Why prehistoric people slept together in circles during Ice Age nights? Imagine a night during the Ice Age. No houses, no electric lights, no thick blankets or heaters. Just endless darkness, bitter winds, and temperatures so cold that even breathing the air could hurt your lungs. Tens of thousands of years ago, prehistoric humans faced a nightly challenge that modern people almost never think about: simply surviving the night. When the sun disappeared behind the frozen horizon, the world became far more dangerous. The temperature could drop dramatically, sometimes far below freezing. Winds would sweep across open plains, snowstorms could appear without warning. But the cold wasn't the only threat. The darkness belonged to predators. Giant cave lions, packs of wolves, saber-toothed cats, and massive bears all hunted under the cover of night. Humans were not the top predators back then. In many places, they were simply another animal trying to survive. So prehistoric people developed a strategy that may seem unusual today. They slept together in circles. This was not random. It was not just about comfort. It was a survival system refined through thousands of years of experience. To understand why they did this, you have to imagine life during the Ice Age as it really was. Small human groups moved constantly across harsh landscapes. These groups were usually made up of families and close relatives, often between 20 and 40 people. Anthropologists sometimes call these groups bands. Every day was focused on survival. Some members would hunt animals like mammoths, reindeer, or bison. Others would gather plants, roots, nuts, and berries. They had to constantly watch the sky, the weather, and the movements of animals. But when night arrived, the group had to solve one huge problem. How do you stay warm enough to survive until morning? Humans are actually not very good at handling extreme cold. Unlike animals with thick fur, our bodies lose heat quickly. During the Ice Age, temperatures could fall to deadly levels. Fires helped, of course. Fire was one of the most powerful technologies early humans possessed. It provided warmth, protection, and light. But fire had limits. Fuel could run out. Wind could blow flames away. And even a strong fire couldn't always keep an entire group warm across a freezing night. This is where the circle came in. Members of the group would lie down close together, forming a tight ring around the fire, or sometimes around the most vulnerable members of the group. Children and elders were often placed toward the center. Stronger adults formed the outer ring. Their bodies acted like living walls of warmth. Human bodies naturally produce heat. When people lie close together, that heat becomes shared. The warmth then that would normally escape into the cold air instead stays trapped inside the group. The effect is surprisingly powerful. Even today, scientists studying survival situations know that group body heat can dramatically slow heat loss. Prehistoric humans discovered this long before modern science explained it. But warmth was only part of the reason for the circle. The shape itself mattered. A circle allows everyone to face outward or shift positions easily during the night. If a strange sound came from the darkness, someone in the outer ring could wake up and respond quickly. Remember, these people lived in a world where predators were real and dangerous. Sleeping alone would have been incredibly risky. But inside a circle of 20 or 30 people, the chances of survival increased dramatically. Predators prefer easy targets. A tight group of alert humans surrounding a fire was not easy prey. The circle also allowed for shared responsibility. Some individuals would stay partially awake during the night. Anthropologists sometimes call this sentinel behavior. While most of the group slept, a few members listened for movement, watched the fire, and kept an eye on the darkness. Then later in the night, someone else might take that role. It wasn't necessarily organized like a modern guard shift. Instead, humans naturally wake up several times during the night. In prehistoric groups, those moments of wakefulness often became opportunities to check the surroundings and make sure everything was safe. Over time, this created a natural rhythm of protection. But there was something even deeper happening in those circles. Something that helped shape human psychology itself. Sleeping together strengthens social bonds. Humans are one of the most social species on Earth. Our survival has always depended on cooperation. When people shared food, hunted together, cared for children together, and even slept together, they built strong emotional connections. Those connections increased trust. Trust made cooperation easier, and cooperation increased the group's chances of survival. In many ways, the sleeping circle was not just about warmth or protection. It was about community. Inside that circle, everyone belonged. Everyone depended on each other, and everyone contributed to the survival of the group. This pattern may even explain some behaviors humans still have today. For example, many people feel more comfortable sleeping when others are nearby. Children often feel safer when parents are close. Even adults sometimes prefer shared sleeping spaces in certain cultures. These feelings may be echoes of an ancient survival strategy that shaped human life for thousands of generations. But the Ice Age circle had another unexpected advantage. It helped conserve energy. During the Ice Age, calories were extremely valuable. Hunting large animals required enormous effort. Food was never guaranteed. If a person lost too much body heat during the night, their body would burn more energy just trying to stay warm. That meant more food would be needed the next day. By sleeping together and sharing warmth, prehistoric humans reduced the amount of energy each individual needed to survive the night. This small advantage could make the difference between life and death during long winters. And winters during the Ice Age could last many months. Storms would blanket landscapes in snow. Animals would migrate away. Food would become scarce. But the human circle remained. Night after night, generation after generation, people gathered around fires and formed these living rings of warmth and protection. And while they slept, something remarkable was happening. Human society was slowly evolving. Stories were likely told around those fires before sleep. Knowledge about hunting, animals, plants, and survival passed from one generation to the next. Children listened. Young hunters learned. Elders shared wisdom gathered over decades. The circle was not just a sleeping arrangement. It was one of the earliest classrooms in human history. When we think about survival during the Ice Age, we often imagine dramatic scenes of mammoth hunts, roaring fires inside caves, and groups of early humans wearing heavy animal skins. But the truth is, survival often depended on much quieter strategies. One of the most powerful of these strategies happened when everyone stopped moving, stopped hunting, and simply tried to sleep. Because the Ice Age night was not just cold, it was brutally cold. In some regions of the world, temperatures could fall far below freezing for long stretches of the year. The wind moved across open tundra landscapes without any forest to block it. Snow reflected the moonlight, creating a strange glowing darkness that stretched across endless plains. For prehistoric humans, falling asleep in this environment meant entering a very vulnerable state. When a person sleeps, their body temperature naturally drops. Muscles relax, awareness fades, reactions slow down. All of these things make sleep dangerous in extreme cold. If the body loses heat faster than it can produce it, hypothermia begins. At first it feels like shivering and discomfort, but as body temperature drops further, confusion appears. The body becomes weaker. Eventually, the heart and brain begin to fail. Ice Age humans didn't understand the biology of hypothermia the way modern medicine explains it today. But they understood something just as important. They understood patterns. Over thousands of years, early humans observed what worked and what didn't. Groups that stayed warm survived the winter. Groups that didn't disappeared. And one of the patterns that worked best was sleeping close together. The human body constantly produces heat. Even when resting, our bodies burn calories to keep internal organs functioning. The process generates warmth. Normally, that warmth escapes into the surrounding air. But when several people lie close together, something interesting happens. The heat from each body begins to overlap with the heat from the others. Instead of escaping into the cold air, the warmth becomes trapped between bodies, blankets of animal skins, and the ground beneath them. This creates a small pocket of warmer air around the group. Modern scientists sometimes refer to this as microclimate heat retention. But prehistoric humans didn't need scientific terminology. They simply noticed that when people slept together, the night felt less deadly. There is a similar behavior in many animals. Penguins, for example, famously gather into tight huddles during Antarctic winters. Thousands of birds press close together, constantly shifting positions so that no individual stays on the cold outer edge for too long. The inside of a penguin huddle can be dramatically warmer than the air outside. Early humans were doing something surprisingly similar. But humans added something unique. They used circles. A circular sleeping formation offered several advantages that a simple pile of people would not. First, the circle helped distribute warmth evenly. If everyone simply crowded together randomly, some people might remain exposed to the cold air while others received too much heat. A circle allowed bodies to form a continuous barrier around the group. Heat moved inward and circulated through the entire formation. Second, the circle created a natural structure for protection. The strongest and most capable adults often position themselves along the outer edge. These individuals could react quickly if danger approached during the night. Children, injured members, or elderly people often rested closer to the center where the temperature was slightly warmer, and the risk of sudden attack was lower. This structure created layers of safety. Even the fire itself sometimes played a role in the formation. In many prehistoric camps, the fire burned at the center of the sleeping circle. In other cases, the fire was placed just outside the ring, depending on wind direction and available space. Fire provided warmth, but it also served another purpose: light. Even a small fire pushes back the darkness. Flickering flames create moving shadows that many animals instinctively avoid. Predators often hesitate before approaching firelight, especially when human voices or movement are nearby. But fires required constant attention. Someone needed to feed the flames with wood or dried animal dung. If the fire died during the coldest hours of the night, the group could quickly find themselves in danger. The circle helped solve this problem too. Because people were positioned around the fire, someone was almost always awake or half awake nearby. A small movement, a shift in sleep, or a moment of restlessness could be enough for someone to notice the fire getting low. They could add fuel before the flames died out. This small detail may seem unimportant today, but during the Ice Age, a dying fire in the middle of the night could mean the difference between warmth and deadly cold. Another important factor was the ground itself. Cold ground pulls heat away from the body very quickly. Lying directly on frozen earth can cause heat loss even faster than cold air. Prehistoric humans solved this by using layers. Animal skins, dried grass, leaves, and even branches were placed beneath sleeping bodies. These materials created insulation between people and the frozen ground. When the group formed a circle on top of these layers, the insulation worked even better. The materials trapped warmth rising from the bodies above them. This combination of insulation, shared body heat, and fire created a surprisingly effective survival system. But the circle also influenced something else that was just as important as warmth: sleep patterns. Modern humans often think of sleep as one long, uninterrupted period during the night. But anthropologists studying traditional societies have discovered that human sleep is often naturally segmented. People may fall asleep for a few hours, wake up briefly, talk or move around, then fall asleep again. During the Ice Age, this pattern may have been extremely useful, because when one person woke up naturally, they could check the fire, listen for sounds outside the camp, and observe the surroundings before falling asleep again. In a large circle of people, someone was almost always in one of these brief waking periods. This created a kind of natural night watch without any formal planning. The group stayed protected, simply because human sleep naturally cycles between deeper and lighter stages. There was another subtle benefit to the circle that might not be obvious at first. It helped regulate fear. The Ice Age night was filled with strange sounds. Wind across frozen plains could howl like distant voices. Ice cracking on lakes could echo through valleys. Animals moved through the darkness unseen. For a human sleeping alone, these sounds could create overwhelming fear. But inside a group, fear was shared and reduced. The presence of other breathing bodies nearby created reassurance. The warmth of others, the soft sounds of sleeping companions, and the glow of the fire all signaled safety. Psychologists today call this social buffering. The presence of trusted companions reduces stress and fear responses in the brain. Prehistoric humans experienced this every night. The circle was not only protecting their bodies, it was calming their minds. And this calmness helped people sleep more deeply, recover more energy, and wake up stronger for the challenges of the next day. Over thousands of years, these small advantages added up. Groups that mastered these survival techniques lived longer. They raised more children. Their knowledge passed to future generations. Meanwhile, groups that failed to stay warm or safe during the night often disappeared from history without leaving a trace. So the simple act of sleeping together in circles became something much bigger than just a habit. It became part of the human survival blueprint. A quiet, ancient strategy repeated across countless campsites, across frozen valleys, across continents locked in ice, and long before written history, before cities, before agriculture, before civilization itself, human beings were already learning one of the most important lessons of survival. Sometimes the best protection against a dangerous world is simply staying close together. To truly understand why prehistoric people slept together in circles, you have to understand something about the world they lived in. It was not a peaceful wilderness. It was a dangerous, competitive landscape filled with powerful animals that were stronger, faster, and better adapted to survive in extreme cold than humans were. At night, the balance of power often shifted even more. During the day, humans had advantages. They could see clearly, communicate with each other, coordinate hunts, and use tools or weapons like spears. Firelight also made predators more cautious. But night changed everything. Darkness covered the land like a blanket. Visibility dropped dramatically. Sounds traveled farther through the cold air, and many of the animals that shared the Ice Age world with humans were perfectly designed to hunt in these conditions. Among the most feared predators of that time were cave lions. These animals were even larger than modern lions. Some researchers estimate that they could weigh over 300 kilograms. They were powerful, muscular hunters capable of bringing down enormous prey. Unlike the lions that roam African savannas today, cave lions often lived in colder environments. They roamed the plains and forests of prehistoric Eurasia, stalking animals such as horses, bison, and young mammoths. And sometimes humans. Humans were not their preferred prey, but a sleeping human could easily become an opportunity, especially if that human was alone. Another terrifying predator was the saber-toothed cat. With its long, curved fangs, this animal has become one of the most famous predators of the Ice Age. Its scientific name was Smilodon. Although many people imagine it chasing prey across open land, researchers believe it may have relied heavily on ambush attacks. It likely hid in tall grass, bushes, or forest edges, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A lone human moving through darkness would have been extremely vulnerable to such an ambush. Then there were the wolves. Ancient wolves were not always exactly like the wolves we know today. Many were larger and traveled in highly organized packs. A hungry pack of wolves could surround prey and slowly wear it down. A sleeping person outside a group could become a target. But wolves were cautious animals. They preferred prey that looked weak or isolated. A large group of humans sitting together near a fire, making noise and holding weapons, was far less attractive. Even the massive cave bear posed a danger. These enormous bears could weigh over 500 kilograms. Although many cave bears were primarily plant eaters, they were still extremely powerful animals capable of killing if threatened or desperate for food. And caves themselves were not always safe shelters. Many caves were originally occupied by bears long before humans arrived. Archaeologists have found caves where both humans and bears used the same space at different times. Sometimes those encounters may have happened suddenly in the middle of the night. Now imagine trying to sleep alone in a world filled with these animals. Every rustle in the grass could mean danger. Every distant growl could signal a predator moving through the darkness. Sleeping alone would not just be uncomfortable. It could be deadly. This is one of the biggest reasons prehistoric humans formed tight sleeping circles. A group of humans created a powerful signal to predator. It said, "This prey is not easy." Predators prefer animals that can be attacked quickly with minimal risk. Injuries in the wild are extremely dangerous. Even a small wound can become infected or prevent an animal from hunting successfully. For a predator, attacking a group of alert humans with weapons and fire could lead to serious injury. So most predators avoided these situations whenever possible. The sleeping circle turned humans into something that looked much bigger than a single animal. Instead of scattered individuals, predators saw a cluster of bodies, voices, and movement around flames. And that cluster was often awake enough to react. But protection did not come only from numbers. Humans had another advantage: tools. Even during the Ice Age, prehistoric humans had already developed a wide range of weapons and tools. Spears made from wood and stone could be used to defend the group if an animal approached too closely. Stone knives allowed quick cutting of meat, skins, and materials. Some groups also created simple spear throwers that increased the power and distance of thrown weapons. Even a large predator had to be careful approaching a group that could suddenly strike back. This combination of fire, tools, and numbers created something powerful: a defensive community. The sleeping circle was essentially a living shield. But interestingly, the circle did more than protect the group from animals. It also helped protect them from the environment itself. Ice Age winds could be incredibly harsh. On open tundra landscapes, the wind had nothing to slow it down. It could blow across the land for hundreds of kilometers. Wind removes body heat much faster than still air. So the people forming the outer ring of the sleeping circle often acted as wind blockers for those inside the group. Their bodies absorbed the worst of the cold wind, while the center of the circle stayed slightly warmer and calmer. Over the course of a long winter night, this difference could matter a lot. Humans likely rotated positions during the night. Someone who started on the outer edge might shift toward the inside later, while another person moved outward. This constant small movement helped distribute warmth and exposure more evenly. It also meant no single person had to endure the harshest conditions for the entire night. Another interesting discovery comes from archaeology. When researchers study prehistoric campsites, they sometimes find patterns in the placement of hearths, tools, and sleeping areas. These patterns suggest that people often organized their camps carefully. In several Ice Age sites, central fire pits appear to have been surrounded by activity areas and resting spaces. While the exact sleeping arrangements cannot always be proven with absolute certainty, the evidence strongly suggests that groups gathered closely around these fires, not scattered randomly, but together. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have also noticed similar sleeping patterns. Many traditional groups still sleep in clusters, often close to fires or within protective arrangements that allow quick response to danger. These modern practices may offer a window into behaviors that humans developed tens of thousands of years ago. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the prehistoric sleeping circle is not just how practical it was, it's how deeply human it was. Inside those circles were families, parents protecting children, friends sharing warmth, elders resting after long lives of survival and experience, young hunters preparing for the next day's journey. They were not just forming a survival formation, they were forming a community. In the flickering firelight of the Ice Age night, surrounded by darkness and distant animal sounds, these groups created small islands of safety in a wild and unpredictable world. And night after night, those circles continued. Across valleys, across frozen plains, across generations, long before cities existed, long before written language, long before history books. Humans were already learning something powerful. Together, they were stronger than the cold, stronger than the predators, and stronger than the darkness itself. If you could travel back in time and quietly observe a prehistoric campsite during the Ice Age, you might notice something surprising. The camp would not look random. It would not look chaotic. Instead, you would likely see patterns. Even though prehistoric humans did not leave behind written instructions or maps, their camps often followed a natural kind of organization. Archaeologists studying ancient sites have spent decades trying to understand these patterns. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture of Ice Age life has begun to emerge. The clues come from many places. Stone tools left behind in the soil, bones from animals that were hunted and eaten, ash from ancient fires, fragments of shelters, even tiny scratches on the ground that reveal where people once walked, worked, and rested. One of the most famous prehistoric sites that helps scientists understand these patterns is Dolní Věstonice. This site dates back more than 25,000 years, deep into the Ice Age. When archaeologists began excavating the area, they discovered something extraordinary. The camp appeared to have been carefully arranged. At the center of the settlement were hearths, places where fires had burned repeatedly over long periods of time. Around these hearths were areas where tools were made, food was prepared, and people likely gathered to talk and share stories. And surrounding these central areas were spaces that researchers believe were used for resting and sleeping. The layout suggested that people gathered closely around fires, creating warm and protected living spaces. This arrangement makes sense when you consider the environment they lived in. Ice Age temperatures could be brutal. A central fire would have been the most reliable source of warmth and light. Staying close to it would increase the chances of surviving the long, freezing nights. Another fascinating location that provides insight into prehistoric life is Mesozoic Mammoth Bone Settlement. Here, archaeologists discovered something truly remarkable. Ancient humans had constructed shelters using the bones of mammoths. Massive skulls, tusks, and long bones were arranged to form circular structures. These bones were then covered with animal skins, creating strong shelters that could block wind and trap heat. Inside these structures, researchers found fire pits and evidence of daily life. The circular design of the shelters themselves may have influenced how people slept inside them. A round structure naturally encourages people to lie along the edges, leaving space in the center for warmth, firelight, and movement. Over time, this could have reinforced the circular sleeping arrangement that many scientists believe was common in prehistoric groups. Another famous site that reveals the importance of fire and social gathering is Kostenki Archaeological Complex. This region contains dozens of ancient campsites dating back more than 30,000 years. Researchers studying these locations noticed repeated patterns of hearth placement and activity zones. Tools were often found in specific areas, while animal bones were concentrated in others. This kind of organization suggests that prehistoric humans were already structuring their living spaces in ways that made daily life more efficient. But the most interesting clues about sleeping arrangements often come from subtle evidence. For example, archaeologists sometimes find areas with fewer sharp stone fragments. This may indicate places where people avoided dropping tools or working with dangerous materials. Why would they do that? Because those areas may have been used for resting and sleeping. No one wants to lie down on a bed of sharp stone flakes. Another clue comes from the distribution of animal skins and organic materials. Although most soft materials decay over thousands of years, sometimes traces remain in the soil. These traces can show where bedding may have been placed. And once again, these bedding areas often appear close to hearths. Fire and sleep were closely connected. But archaeological evidence does not only come from campsites. Scientists also learn about prehistoric life by studying the behavior of modern hunter-gatherer societies. While today's hunter-gatherers live in very different environments, many of their survival strategies still reflect ancient patterns that humans developed long ago. In some traditional communities, families sleep close together in shared spaces, often around a central fire or heat source. These sleeping arrangements create warmth, safety, and social connection. Although modern groups may not face the exact same predators as Ice Age humans, the underlying logic remains the same. Humans survive better when they stay together. Archaeologists also study ancient footprints preserved in mud and sediment. These footprints can sometimes reveal how people moved around campsites. They show paths between fires, tool-making areas, and shelters. In rare cases, footprints even show where individuals may have rested or sat for long periods. It is almost like seeing a frozen moment of ancient life. One famous example comes from White Sands National Park, where ancient human footprints have been preserved for thousands of years. These tracks reveal groups moving together across landscapes, sometimes alongside the tracks of large Ice Age animals. Although these particular footprints show travel rather than sleeping, they remind us how closely humans lived with the natural world during that time. Every movement, every decision, and every shelter mattered, because survival was never guaranteed, and night was always approaching. As the sun set and temperatures dropped, prehistoric groups returned to their camps. They gathered wood. They fed the fire. They finished preparing food and tools. Children listened to the voices of elders telling stories or sharing knowledge. The fire crackled softly in the cold air. Slowly, people began to settle down. Animal skins were spread across the ground. Bodies moved closer together. The circles slowly formed. Some people laid down first. Others stayed awake a little longer, adding wood to the fire or watching the dark horizon. Eventually, the entire group rested within that living ring of warmth and protection. Above them stretched a sky filled with stars, brighter than anything most modern people ever see. Around them was a world filled with danger. But inside the circle, there was safety. Inside the circle, there was warmth. And inside the circle, humanity continued to survive. Night after night. Winter after winter. Generation after generation. Long before cities, governments, or civilizations existed, prehistoric humans were already mastering one of the most important survival strategies in human history. They stayed close. They protected each other. And together, they faced the darkness of the Ice Age. When we talk about prehistoric humans sleeping together in circles, it's easy to think only about the physical reasons. Warmth, protection, fire, predators. All of those things were incredibly important. Without them, surviving the Ice Age would have been nearly impossible. But there was another powerful reason humans slept close together. Something happening deep inside the human brain. Something that still affects us today. Because humans are not just physical creatures struggling against the environment. We are also emotional and social beings whose brains are shaped by millions of years of evolution. And during the Ice Age, the brain learned something important. Being close to others means safety. Imagine lying alone on a frozen landscape tens of thousands of years ago. The fire has burned low. The wind moves across the plains. Somewhere in the distance, an animal calls out in the darkness. Your senses would be on high alert. Every sound would feel threatening. Your heart would beat faster. Your brain would release stress hormones to keep you awake and ready for danger. Sleeping deeply in that situation would be extremely difficult. Now imagine the same night, but instead of being alone, you are lying among 20 or 30 members of your group. You can hear the breathing of others nearby. Someone shifts in their sleep. A few people are still awake, quietly talking near the fire. The flames glow softly, pushing back the darkness. Suddenly, the night feels very different. Your brain begins to relax. Your body releases less stress. You feel safer. Modern psychologists call this phenomenon social safety. The human nervous system responds strongly to the presence of trusted companions. When we are near people we trust, our brain reduces the signals that trigger fear and anxiety. This response is ancient. It evolved long before written history. During the Ice Age, individuals who felt safe enough to sleep deeply had a major advantage. Good sleep allowed the body to recover energy, repair muscles, and strengthen the immune system. People who slept well could hunt better the next day. They could think more clearly. They could react faster to danger. Over thousands of generations, the human brain became closely connected to this idea. Safety comes from the group. This connection still exists today, even though our environment has changed dramatically. For example, many children feel uncomfortable sleeping alone in a dark room. They often ask parents to stay nearby or leave a light on. From a modern perspective, this might seem unnecessary. A child sleeping in a safe house does not face predators outside the door. But the human brain did not evolve in modern houses. It evolved on open landscapes during the Ice Age. For most of human history, sleeping alone really was dangerous. So the brain developed instincts that encouraged people to stay close together during the night. Even adults sometimes experience echoes of these ancient instincts. People may feel more comfortable sleeping next to a partner or family member. Some individuals sleep better when they can hear others nearby in the house. And when people travel to unfamiliar places, they often sleep more lightly. The brain becomes more alert because the environment feels less safe. Scientists studying sleep have even discovered something fascinating about how the brain behaves in new environments. When people sleep in an unfamiliar place, one side of the brain sometimes remains more alert than the other. This is sometimes called the first night effect. It's almost like the brain keeps one eye open, just in case something goes wrong. This behavior may be a leftover survival mechanism from our prehistoric past. In Ice Age camps, this kind of light alertness could have helped groups respond quickly to threats. If one person noticed movement or heard an unusual sound, they could wake the others. The circle made this response faster. Everyone was close enough to react immediately. But the psychological benefits of the sleeping circle went even deeper. Sleeping together strengthened trust. Trust was essential for survival in prehistoric societies. Hunting large animals required cooperation. Sharing food required fairness. Raising children required support from many adults. If a group lacked trust, it could fall apart quickly. The sleeping circle helped reinforce these bonds every single night. When people slept close together, they became familiar with each other's rhythms and behaviors. They heard each other breathe. They sensed movement. They shared warmth. These small experiences built a sense of belonging. Inside the circle, each person knew they were part of something larger than themselves. And belonging has always been one of the strongest human needs. Even today, feelings of loneliness can have powerful effects on mental and physical health. Humans are simply not designed to live completely alone. Our brains expect social connections. They expect cooperation. They expect shared experiences. During the Ice Age, the sleeping circle was one of the most powerful ways those connections were reinforced. Night after night, year after year, families gathered around fires and rested together. Children grew up inside these circles. From their earliest memories, they learned that safety came from the group. They learned to trust the people around them. They learned that survival depended on cooperation. These lessons shaped human culture long before civilizations appeared. And interestingly, traces of these ancient patterns still exist in many parts of the world. In some cultures, large families still sleep in shared rooms or spaces. In others, children sleep close to their parents for many years. Even in modern societies where private bedrooms are common, many people still gather together during times of stress or danger. During storms, disasters, or emergencies, people naturally move closer together. They seek comfort in the presence of others. It's an instinct older than cities, older than agriculture, older than written language. It's an instinct born during nights when the world was colder, darker, and far more dangerous. Back then, survival depended on something very simple. Stay close to the fire, stay close to your people. And when night falls, form the circle. Because inside that circle, prehistoric humans found warmth, protection, trust, and something even more powerful. They found the beginning of human society itself. To truly understand the importance of the sleeping circle, you also have to understand just how brutal Ice Age winters really were. When people hear the words Ice Age, they sometimes imagine a world completely covered in ice. The reality was more complicated. Huge glaciers did exist, spreading across massive parts of the northern continents. But many regions where humans lived were actually vast open landscapes called steppe tundra. These areas were cold, dry, and windy. Grasslands stretched across the horizon, broken only by patches of shrubs, frozen rivers, and occasional rocky hills. During winter, temperatures could drop to levels that modern humans would find almost impossible to tolerate without advanced clothing and shelter. And winter didn't just last a few weeks. In many places, winter dominated the year. Long months of freezing temperatures forced humans to adapt in ways that modern people rarely have to think about. Food became harder to find. Animals migrated or moved in smaller groups. Plants disappeared under snow and ice. The sun itself stayed low on the horizon, bringing shorter and dimmer days. For prehistoric people, winter nights could feel endless. And during those nights, staying warm was not just about comfort. It was about survival. The human body must maintain a stable internal temperature. If body heat drops too far, vital organs begin to fail. The brain becomes confused, the heart slows down, and eventually the body can no longer function. This process, known today as hypothermia, was one of the greatest dangers faced by Ice Age humans. But prehistoric groups slowly developed clever solutions to fight the cold. One of those solutions was the sleeping circle. Another important solution was shelter. Humans during the Ice Age did not always live in caves, even though caves are often shown in movies and stories. Caves were useful when they were available, but many regions had few natural caves. In those places, humans built their own shelters using the materials they could find. One fascinating example of these shelters can be seen at the site of Mesirik Mammoth Bone Settlement. At this location, archaeologists discovered homes built almost entirely from mammoth bones. Large skulls formed the base of the walls. Massive tusks curved upward to support the structure. Long leg bones were stacked together to create strong frames. Over these bone frames, prehistoric humans likely stretched thick animal hides to block wind and snow. Inside these shelters, fires burned in the center, creating warmth that slowly filled the enclosed space. But even inside these shelters, warmth was not guaranteed. Cold air could still seep through small gaps. Strong winds could push freezing temperatures inside, and the fire itself could only warm a limited area. This is where the sleeping circle became incredibly effective. By lying close together around the central fire, the group amplified the heat produced by both the fire and their own bodies. Think of it like layers of warmth. The fire produced heat. The bodies produced heat. The shelter trapped that heat inside. Together, these layers created a small pocket of survivable temperature in an otherwise frozen world. Even slight increases in warmth could make a huge difference during an Ice Age night. Another interesting feature of these circular sleeping arrangements is how they may have influenced communication. Nighttime was one of the few periods when the entire group gathered in one place without the pressure of immediate work. During the day, people were busy hunting, gathering, preparing food, repairing tools, and moving across the landscape. But once darkness fell and the fire was lit, the pace of life slowed. People sat together. They rested. They talked. And this is where something remarkable may have been happening. Storytelling. Stories were one of the earliest ways humans shared knowledge. Before writing existed, stories helped pass important information from one generation to the next. How to hunt certain animals. Which plants were safe to eat. Where dangerous predators lived. How to survive during harsh winters. Around the fire, elders could teach younger members of the group through stories that were easy to remember. Children listened carefully. Young hunters learned valuable lessons. And the entire group strengthened its shared identity. The circular sleeping formation made this kind of communication easier. Everyone could see the fire. Everyone could hear the storyteller. The shape naturally focused attention toward the center. Even after people began lying down to sleep, the conversation might continue quietly. Voices softened. The fire crackled gently. Someone added another piece of wood to keep the flames alive. Slowly, one by one, people drifted into sleep. But even in sleep, the circle continued to function. Some people woke briefly to adjust their position. Someone else stirred to feed the fire. A child might shift closer to a parent for warmth. These small movements kept the system working through to the night. Warmth was shared. Safety was maintained. And the group survived another freezing night. Over thousands of years, these nightly gatherings did more than protect humans from the cold. They helped shape human culture. Inside these circles, early language may have grown stronger. Inside these circles, traditions began to form. Inside these circles, humans developed deeper emotional bonds that strengthened cooperation. The Ice Age was a harsh teacher. It forced humans to adapt or disappear. But those who learned to rely on each other survived. And the simple act of sleeping together in circles became one of the quiet foundations of human survival. A strategy born from necessity, refined through generations, and repeated countless times under the cold stars of a frozen world. Even today, tens of thousands of years later, the legacy of those ancient circles may still live inside us, in our desire for companionship, in our need for community, and in the simple comfort we feel when we know someone else is nearby as we fall asleep. Because long ago, on the coldest nights the world has ever seen, being alone was dangerous, but being together meant survival. To really understand how the sleeping circle worked, we need to imagine what a full day looked like for prehistoric people during the Ice Age. Because the circle did not just appear suddenly at night. It was the final moment of a long day of survival. Every morning began with the slow return of light. The sun would rise over frozen plains, icy rivers, or snow-covered valleys. The air was usually bitterly cold, especially during winter months. The fire that had burned through the night was often reduced to glowing embers. One of the first tasks of the morning was to bring the fire back to life. Someone would gently stir the ashes, add dry grass, small sticks, and pieces of wood. Soon the flames would grow again, sending warmth into the cold air. Fire was one of the most important tools humans had during the Ice Age. Without it, surviving the freezing temperatures would have been almost impossible. Once the fire was burning again, the camp slowly came to life. People stretched, rubbed their hands together to warm them, and prepared for the work of the day. But not everyone had the same job. Ice Age groups were small communities, and each member played a role that helped the group survive. Some people prepared tools. Stone tools were essential for almost everything. Knives made from carefully shaped stone flakes were used to cut meat, scrape animal hides, and shape wood into spears or other tools. One of the most advanced stone tool cultures of the Ice Age was the Gravettian culture, which existed across parts of Europe around 30,000 years ago. People from this culture produced incredibly sharp stone blades and finely crafted hunting weapons. These tools made hunting more efficient and increased the chances of bringing food back to camp. Other members of the group focused on preparing clothing. Animal hides needed to be scraped, stretched, and softened before they could be used as clothing or blankets. This process required patience and skill. Good clothing was essential during the Ice Age. Thick fur garments protected the body from freezing winds and helped retain heat during long nights. Meanwhile, hunters prepared to leave the camp. Hunting large Ice Age animals was dangerous work. Creatures like mammoths, bison, and giant deer were powerful and could easily injure or kill a human. One famous example of these massive animals is the woolly mammoth. These enormous animals could stand more than 3 meters tall at the shoulder and weigh several tons. Hunting one required careful planning and teamwork. Hunters often worked together using spears and coordinated strategies to trap or weaken the animal. But hunting did not always succeed. Sometimes hunters returned with large amounts of meat. Other times they returned empty-handed. This uncertainty made cooperation inside the group extremely important. Food was usually shared among everyone. This sharing strengthened social bonds and helped ensure that even those who could not hunt, such as children, elders, or injured members, still had enough to eat. During the day, children learned by watching adults. They practiced throwing small spears, learned how to recognize animal tracks, and helped with simple tasks around the camp. Elders often played an important role as teachers and storytellers. Their experience helped guide the group's decisions about where to travel, when to hunt, and how to survive changing weather conditions. As the day slowly moved toward evening, the group's focus shifted. Night was coming, and preparation for night was critical. Before darkness arrived, people gathered firewood. Firewood had to last through the entire night. If the fire died in the coldest hours before dawn, the temperature drop could become dangerous. Dry wood was especially valuable. Wet wood produced smoke, but little heat. So people searched carefully for branches that would burn well. Once the firewood was collected, people returned to the center of camp. The fire grew stronger as more wood was added. Cooking began. Meat from hunts was roasted over flames or placed near hot stones to cook slowly. The smell of food filled the cold air. For many prehistoric groups, this was the most social part of the day. Everyone gathered near the fire. People talked about the day's events. Hunters described what they had seen during their journeys. Others shared news about animal movements or weather changes. Laughter sometimes filled the air as stories were told. These moments strengthened the group. They built trust. They reinforced cooperation. And as darkness deepened, the camp slowly transformed into a resting place. Animal skins were spread across the ground. Soft grasses or leaves were sometimes added for extra insulation. The sleeping circle began to form. But this circle was not random. Positions often reflected roles within the group. Strong adults, especially experienced hunters, frequently took positions along the outer edge of the circle. This placement allowed them to react quickly if danger approached. If a predator came near the camp, those on the outer ring could grab weapons and respond immediately. Closer to the center of the circle were children and older members of the group. These individuals benefit most from the extra warmth created by the surrounding bodies. Parents often slept close to their children, providing both warmth and protection. This arrangement created layers of safety. The fire remained nearby, sending waves of heat across the circle. Shadows flickered across the ground as flames moved in the wind. One by one, people began to fall asleep. Some drifted off quickly after a long day of work. Others stayed awake a little longer, watching the fire or listening to the sounds of the night. Outside the circle, the Ice Age world continued its endless motion. Winds moved across the frozen land. Animals traveled through darkness searching for food. Predators hunted quietly under the stars. But inside the circle, something remarkable existed. a small, fragile island of warmth and safety. A human community working together to survive in one of the harshest environments Earth has ever known. The sleeping circle was not just about heat. It was not just about defense. It was about cooperation. It was about trust. And it was about the powerful idea that humans survive best when they protect one another. Night after night, these circles formed across prehistoric landscapes, across icy plains, across frozen forests, across valleys and riverbanks where small human groups fought to survive against the cold. And every time the circle formed, it represented something deeper than a sleeping arrangement. It represented the beginning of human society. Because long before cities, governments, and civilizations existed, human beings were already learning how to live together. When the sun finally disappeared below the horizon during the Ice Age, the world changed in ways that modern people rarely experience. Darkness arrived quickly. Without cities, electricity, or artificial lights, the night sky became incredibly deep and vast. The stars were brighter than anything most people today have ever seen. But along with that beauty came something else: uncertainty. Because once darkness covered the land, humans were no longer the strongest creatures in the environment. Many animals were far better adapted to hunting at night. Their eyes could see in low light. Their ears could detect the smallest sounds. Their noses could track scent across long distances. For prehistoric humans, night meant vulnerability. And one of the most important senses they relied on after dark was hearing. Ice Age nights were filled with sounds. The wind sweeping across frozen grasslands, branches cracking in the distance, snow shifting beneath the feet of animals moving through the darkness. Every sound mattered. People sleeping in the circle were never completely unconscious of their surrounding. Even while resting, the human brain remained partially alert to unusual noises. If a strange sound broke the rhythm of the night, someone in the group might wake immediately. Perhaps a hunter lying on the outer edge of the circle would open their eyes. They would listen carefully. Was it just the wind? Or something else? Predators sometimes moved silently, but total silence was rare. A heavy animal stepping on frozen ground could produce a faint crunch. A wolf moving through dry grass might create a soft rustling sound. Even large cats sometimes brushed against shrubs or stones as they approached. One of the most powerful predators roaming Ice Age landscapes was the cave lion. These lions were among the largest cats that ever lived. They were strong enough to hunt animals as large as bison and young mammoths. Unlike modern lions, which usually hunt in open savannas, cave lions often roamed colder environments across Europe and northern Asia. If one of these animals approached a human camp at night, the situation could become dangerous quickly. But the sleeping circle gave humans an advantage, because many ears were listening at the same time. If one person noticed a strange noise, they could quickly alert the others. A shout, a sudden movement, the grabbing of a spear. The group could react within seconds, and predators usually preferred easier prey. If an animal realized the humans were awake and alert, it often backed away rather than risk injury. Another predator that sometimes roamed Ice Age regions was the dire wolf. These wolves were larger and more heavily built than many modern wolves. They traveled in packs and were skilled hunters capable of taking down large prey animals. A pack of wolves might approach a campsite out of curiosity, drawn by the smell of meat or food scraps. But wolves were also cautious animals. A large group of humans gathered around fire and weapons was not an easy target. Most of the time, the wolves would observe from a distance before disappearing back into the darkness. Fire itself played an important role in this nighttime defense. Many animals instinctively fear fire. The bright light, the heat, and the unpredictable movement of flames create something unfamiliar and threatening for most wild creatures. Prehistoric humans understood this advantage. They kept their fires burning through the night whenever possible. But interestingly, in some cases, fires were not always placed directly in the center of the sleeping group. Sometimes multiple small fires were used around the edges of the camp. These outer fires created a kind of glowing boundary. The light and heat formed a barrier that predators were less likely to cross. Inside this ring of light, humans could rest more safely. This technique may have been especially useful in open landscapes where animals could approach from any direction. By creating several small fires, humans expanded the protected area around their camp. But keeping fires alive required constant attention. Wood had to be added regularly. Someone needed to wake up occasionally to feed the flames. If the fire died during the coldest part of the night, the temperature inside the camp could drop dangerously. This meant that even during sleep, members of the group sometimes took turns watching the fire. These nighttime watchers were not always fully awake the entire time. Often they rested lightly while staying aware enough to respond if something changed. If the fire grew weak, they added wood. If an unusual sound came from the darkness, they listened carefully. And if danger approached, they alerted the others. This quiet system of shared responsibility allowed the group to survive night after night. It was another example of how cooperation helped humans overcome the harsh realities of Ice Age life. The sleeping circle also allowed people to respond quickly if a sudden emergency occurred. If a predator came too close, the outer members of the circle could grab spears or stones immediately. Those closer to the center could move children or vulnerable members of the group farther away from harm. The group functioned almost like a living shield. Everyone had a role. Everyone contributed to the safety of the whole. Outside the circle, the Ice Age night continued its mysterious rhythm. Owls glided silently through the air, hunting small animals. Foxes searched for scraps near the edges of camps. Far across the plains, herds of animals moved slowly under the starlight. Occasionally, a distant roar or howl echoed across the frozen land. Inside the human camp, those sounds were reminders of the world beyond the firelight, a world filled with powerful creatures and constant challenges. But within the circle, people slept. Some slept deeply after long days of hunting and work. Others slept lightly, ready to wake if needed. The fire burned steadily. The group remained close together, and through cooperation, awareness, and the simple strength of community, prehistoric humans continued to survive another long Ice Age night. During the Ice Age, the greatest enemy humans faced was not always predators. Often the most dangerous threat came from the weather itself. Cold winds could sweep across the open plains with incredible force. Snowstorms could appear suddenly, turning a quiet night into a battle against freezing temperatures. For prehistoric humans, a severe storm during the night could become a life or death situation. Imagine the scene. The group has already formed their sleeping circle. The fire burns in the center, casting warm orange light across the ground. Outside the camp, darkness stretches endlessly across the frozen landscape. Then the wind begins to rise. At first, it is only a soft whisper across the grass. But slowly the sound grows louder. The wind pushes harder against the camp, rattling branches and sending small clouds of snow swirling through the air. People begin to stir in their sleep. Someone opens their eyes. They listen. Within minutes, the storm grows stronger. Snow starts falling heavily, and the temperature drops even further. This kind of weather was common during the Ice Age. Large cold air systems moved across continents, creating blizzards that could last for hours or even days. If a group was not prepared, the cold could drain body heat quickly. This is where the sleeping circle became even more important. When people lie close together, their combined body heat creates a shared warm zone. Each person acts like a small heater, releasing warmth into the air around them. Alone, that heat disappears quickly into the cold night. But together, the warmth becomes trapped between bodies, animal skins, and the surrounding shelter. The circle acted almost like a natural heating system. Children and older members of the group often stayed closest to the center, where the temperature was warmest. Adults on the outside helped block the wind and hold the formation together. The outer ring of people acted as a shield. Even in heavy winds, their bodies helped reduce how much cold air reached the center of the group. Another critical part of surviving these storms was the use of animal skins. Prehistoric humans relied heavily on hides taken from animals they hunted. These hides were not only used for clothing, but also for bedding and insulation. Many of the animals hunted during the Ice Age had thick fur designed to survive freezing climates. One famous example is the woolly rhinoceros. This massive animal lived across northern Eurasia and had extremely thick fur to survive harsh winters. Its hide could provide excellent insulation once properly prepared. Animal skins were often spread across the ground before people lay down to sleep. This served an important purpose. Cold ground can drain heat from the body very quickly. If someone lies directly on frozen earth, their body heat transfers into the ground, making them colder even if they are covered with blankets. By placing layers of hides between the body and the ground, prehistoric humans reduced this heat loss. Sometimes grasses, moss, or leaves were also placed beneath the skins to create a softer and warmer surface. Once the bedding was prepared, the sleeping circle formed on top of it. During storms, people might pull extra hides over themselves like shared blankets. Several individuals could hold the edges of a large hide, creating a barrier that blocked wind and trapped warmth inside. Inside the shelter, the fire continued to burn. But storms sometimes made maintaining the fire difficult. Strong gusts of wind could blow sparks or scatter ash. Snow could drift into the camp if the shelter was not strong enough. When this happened, members of the group had to wake up and protect the fire. Someone might move stones around the fire pit to shield the flames. Others added more wood to keep the fire strong. If the fire died completely, restarting it in freezing conditions could be extremely difficult. So protecting the fire became a shared responsibility. These moments during storms required quick thinking and teamwork. Everyone had to work together. The hunters, the elders, the younger members of the group. Even children sometimes helped by gathering small sticks or holding hides in place. And once the worst of the storm passed, the group slowly returned to rest. The wind outside might still howl across the frozen landscape. Snow could continue falling silently through the darkness, but inside the circle the warmth slowly returned. Bodies relaxed again. Breathing became steady. The fire crackled gently as flames between pieces of wood. And one by one, people drifted back into sleep. Storms like these were reminders of how fragile human survival could be during the Ice Age. Without cooperation, preparation, and shared warmth, small groups could easily perish in such extreme environments. But humans had one advantage that many other animals did not. They worked together. They shared resources. They protected one another. The sleeping circle represented all of those strengths at once. It combined warmth, protection, communication, and trust into a simple but powerful survival system. And night after night, through storms, freezing winds, and endless winters, that circle helped humans endure one of the harshest periods in Earth's history. Long before cities or civilizations existed, human survival depended on something very simple. Stay close, share warmth, protect the fire, and trust the circle. For a long time, scientists could only imagine how prehistoric humans organized their camps during the Ice Age. Stories about sleeping circles sounded logical. They made sense from a survival perspective. But scientists needed something more than logic. They needed evidence, real physical proof left behind in the ground. And slowly, over many decades, archaeologists began uncovering clues that revealed how ancient human camps were actually arranged. One of the most important places that helped unlock this mystery is Dolní Věstonice. This prehistoric site is more than 25,000 years old and provides one of the most detailed pictures of Ice Age human life ever discovered. When archaeologists began digging there, they uncovered something remarkable. Instead of random piles of tools and bones, they found clear patterns in how objects were distributed across the camp. Stone tools appeared in specific areas. Animal bones were concentrated in other locations. Fire pits appeared in carefully spaced positions. These patterns suggested that prehistoric humans were not living chaotically. They were organizing their camps intentionally. At the center of many living areas, archaeologists found hearths, places where fires had burned repeatedly over long periods of time. Around these hearths, researchers found clusters of tools used for preparing food, cutting meat, and shaping materials. This indicated that the fire served as the center of daily activity. But something even more interesting appeared slightly farther away from the hearth. In certain zones, archaeologists found fewer sharp stone fragments. This detail might sound small, but it tells an important story. When people create stone tools, they produce many sharp flakes that scatter on the ground. These flakes are extremely sharp enough to cut skin easily. If people were sleeping in those areas, lying down among sharp stone fragments would have been uncomfortable and dangerous. So prehistoric humans likely avoided creating tools in the areas where they slept. The result is a pattern in the archaeological record. Work areas full of stone fragments, and nearby areas with far fewer fragments. Many researchers believe these cleaner zones were the sleeping spaces of the camp. When scientists map these areas carefully, they sometimes form curved or circular patterns around the central hearth. This suggests that people may have arranged themselves in rings around the fire. Another fascinating Ice Age site that reveals similar patterns is Kostenki Archaeological Complex. Kostenki contains dozens of ancient settlements spread across a large area. Some of these camps are more than 30,000 years old. When researchers examined these sites, they discovered repeated arrangements of hearths, activity zones, and living spaces. The pattern appeared again and again. Fire in the center, work areas nearby, and quieter spaces beyond that, possibly, used for resting and sleeping. These findings support the idea that prehistoric humans organized their camps in ways that balanced warmth, safety, and efficiency. But sometimes, archaeologists find even more dramatic evidence of prehistoric living spaces. At certain Ice Age sites, scientists have discovered entire structures built by ancient humans. One incredible example comes from Meziriq Mammoth Bone Settlement. At this location, archaeologists uncovered houses built using the bones of mammoths. Large mammoth skulls formed the base of the walls. Long bones were stacked to create strong supports. Massive curved tusks helped shape the circular structure of the shelter. These shelters were then likely covered with animal hides, creating enclosed homes that could trap heat inside. What makes these structures especially interesting is their shape. Many of them are circular. Inside the structures, archaeologists found central fire pits and surrounding areas that appear to have been used for daily living. The circular design of these homes would naturally encourage people to sit and lie down around the central fire, just like the sleeping circles described by scientists. These discoveries show that prehistoric humans were not simply wandering randomly across the landscape. They were skilled planners. They built shelters. They organized living spaces. And they created environments that increased their chances of survival during the harsh Ice Age climate. Archaeologists also study microscopic traces in the soil to learn more about how people used these spaces. Tiny fragments of charcoal reveal where fires burned. Small pieces of bone show where food was prepared. Chemical traces from human activity can even indicate where people spent long periods resting or sleeping. All of these clues combine to form a detailed map of ancient camps. It's almost like reconstructing a snapshot of life from tens of thousands of years ago. And the more scientists study these camps, the clearer one idea becomes. Ice Age humans depended heavily on cooperation. Their camps were designed to bring people together. The fire created warmth and light. The shelter blocked wind and snow, and the circle of people around the fire created a small, protected world in the middle of a dangerous environment. Within that circle, children slept safely beside parents. Hunters rested after long days tracking animals across frozen plains. Elders shared knowledge that helped the group survive another winter. The sleeping circle was not just about warmth. It was about community. It was about trust. And it was about the powerful human instinct to stay close together when facing hardship. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new details about how prehistoric humans lived. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Long before cities, roads, or written language existed, humans were already building societies. Small societies, fragile societies, but societies strong enough to survive the coldest period in human history. And at the heart of those societies, every night, was a simple circle of warmth and protection, a circle that helped humanity endure the Ice Age. By now, it is clear that the sleeping circle was more than just a practical solution for warmth and safety during the Ice Age. It was a cornerstone of early human society, a daily ritual that shaped the way humans lived, worked, and trusted one another. Think about it. Every night, a group of humans huddled together in a circle, surrounded by darkness and danger. The outer ring of adults acted as protector, shielding children, elders, and weaker members from cold and predators. The fire in the center provided heat and light, while animal skins and bedding insulated against the frozen ground. But the circle also fostered something less tangible, yet just as critical: cooperation and social bonding. Within this circle, prehistoric humans communicated. Elders taught children important survival skills. Hunters shared stories of the day's events, tracking animals, and dangers they had faced. Families nurtured one another, reinforcing trust that was essential for survival. Sleeping together strengthened a fundamental human instinct: safety in numbers. This instinct didn't disappear with the end of the Ice Age. It traveled through time, embedded in human behavior, even as societies grew more complex. Today, we still see echoes of it. Children feel comfort sleeping close to parents. People naturally gather together during stressful or dangerous situations. Even in modern communities, social cohesion, trust, and cooperation remain central to survival, now in more symbolic forms. Anthropologists believe that these ancient sleeping circles helped shape not only survival strategies, but also the earliest forms of human communication. Gathered around the fire in a circle, humans developed storytelling, shared knowledge, and organized collective decision-making. They created the earliest foundations of culture, governance, and society itself. In many ways, the sleeping circle was a microcosm of the human world to come. It combined warmth, protection, and trust. It reinforced cooperation, teaching children that survival was a shared responsibility. It fostered communication, passing essential knowledge from one generation to the next. Long before the first cities or written language, humans were already learning how to live together. The Ice Age may have been one of the harshest periods on Earth, but it also taught some of humanity's most important lessons. Humans survive best when they stay together. That simple truth allowed small prehistoric groups to endure freezing nights, predatory threats, and long winters. And over millennia, it shaped the way humans interact, forming the foundations of social behavior we still carry with us today. So the next time you sit around a fire, cuddle under blankets, or feel comforted by the presence of loved ones at night, remember this. You are connected to a long line of ancestors who learned to survive by forming circles of warmth, protection, and trust under the cold Ice Age sky. The sleeping circle was not just a survival strategy. It was the beginning of human society itself. And in that circle, humanity first learned the power of togetherness.